So I want to start by saying, let's not confuse some generational. I'm going to give you sort of the briefest of sketches, give you some just broad statements, some broad generalizations about some of the generational differences you might see. There are still personality preferences and energies and things like that that we talk about within this context. So that's not to say that everybody in my generation is always this way. These are just going to be the briefest of sketches. Having said that, I want to start with something that would drive someone in my generation absolutely crazy. 1966, Bob Dylan gave one of very few interviews that he gave later in the mid to late 60s. He kind of disappeared from interviews, and he was being interviewed, and about a year following when he had sort of made the switch from folk music into using an electric guitar, and he had actually gotten booed at one of his gigs. The interviewer asks, "What made you go the rock and roll route?" To which Dylan replies, "Carelessness. Lost my one true love. I started drinking. First thing I know, I'm in a card game. Then I'm in a crap game. I wake up in a pool hall. Then this big Mexican lady drags me off the table, takes me to Philadelphia. She leaves me alone in her house and it burns down. I wind up in Phoenix. I get a job as a Chinaman. I start working in a dime store and move in with a 13-year-old girl. Then this big Mexican lady from Philadelphia comes in and burns the house down. I go down to Dallas. I get a job as a before in a Charles Atlas before and after ad. I move in with a delivery boy who can cook fantastic chili and hot dogs. Then this 13-year-old girl from Phoenix comes and burns the house down. The delivery boy, he ain't so mild. He gives her the knife, and the next thing I know, I'm in Omaha. It's so cold there, by this time I'm robbing my own bicycles and frying my own fish. I stumble into some luck and get a job as a carburetor at a hot rod races every Thursday night. I move in with a high school teacher who does a little plumbing on the side, who ain't much to look at, but who's built a special kind of refrigerator that can turn newspaper into lettuce. Everything's going good until that delivery boy shows up and tries to knife me. Needless to say, he burned the house down and I hit the road. The first guy that picked me up asked me if I wanted to be a star. What could I say? To which the interviewer replies, "And that's how you became a rock and roll singer?" "No, that's how I got tuberculosis." Now, let us exegete the text, shall we? If you're wondering, if you're thinking to yourself, I've never heard of Generation I, it's because I made it up. Thank you. Some people call it the Millennial generation, which I think is an accurate proposal. They're going to say that it's anyone born from 1980 to 1990 something. I don't know I don't even know if the cutoff is hit yet. But I would argue, I was born in 83, and I would argue that I'm sort of at the really kind of the old end of the Millennial generation. Okay, I know people my own age that I graduated high school with. I will see them from time to time, and we'll talk, and I'll go, "You and I really are not on the same wavelength. Like, you're kind of, you think you kind of landed in the older generation, right?" The reason that one of the reasons why I think this response from Dylan would have driven a millennial crazy, part of it is because we are so used to having absolutely every ounce of information about absolutely everything and every person that has ever existed at our fingertips at any given time, and if you put a roadblock in front of that, we have absolutely no idea what to do with ourselves. So let's talk about a few things. We have sort of the TV generation, which I would call anybody who grew up. If you grew up watching television 50s, 60s, and even 70s, I mean, that's really kind of where we, and then in the 80s, you know, the internet starts to become a thing. The PC starts to sort of take off in the 80s and that kind of thing. But so we have the television generation. We're getting more information. We can see, you know, everybody knows where they were. If you were alive at that time, you all know where you were when Kennedy was shot. You know, in the 80s, you knew where you were when the Challenger exploded. But it was streamed to you, so you got more information than anybody had ever gotten before. But it was sort of channeled, right? Once we got into the internet generation, I remember the first time in the mid-90s, my dad showed me, he's like, "There's this cool thing called a web browser." And I don't know why I remember this, but he was like, "Just think of anything you want to look up." And I was like, "Okay, I don't know, Japanese food." You know, I just for some reason remember looking up Japanese food. It was the most random thing I could possibly consider, you know. Whereas before that, if you wanted to know about Japanese food, I mean, gosh, I mean, there's a million channels. It actually required effort, right? You actually had to like get up and go to the library, which to a millennial, that person would be like, what? Why would I get in my car to go there? I don't understand. So the TV generation sort of moves into the internet generation, which then moves on to now, which is what I would call on demand, or Generation I, because everything is on demand. Everything is on demand. I have my iPhone, my music that's on my iPhone, my email on my iPhone, my personal computer. Everything I have is at my fingertips. Think of a product right now in your head that at some point in your life was sort of a hot commodity. And I don't mean a commodity in like a traditional sense, but like one of the things that comes to my mind is, you remember maybe 15 years ago when the Tickle Me Elmo was the big deal, 10 or maybe it's 10 years ago, the Tickle Me, you couldn't find one anywhere, right? It's like stores were selling out. People were like getting in fights at Toys R Us and like knocking people to the ground and kicking them over, Tickle Me Elmos, or Beanie Babies in the 90s. Remember, it was like, oh, do you have that specific one with yeah, that Beanie Baby is worth 86 cents now. You thought it was going to be worth 2,500. You were wrong. So you were misled. But those commodity, whatever that hot item is of the moment, I can pull this up right now, find whatever item I want from anywhere in the whole world. I can have it, if I had the money in my bank account, I can have it delivered to my house, overnighted at my house tomorrow morning. Do you realize that this has never, ever been the case, yet we're talking about a generation that has never known anything different? When was the last time you can think of that you or someone that you actually know close to you requested a song on the radio? I have a 3-year-old who just turned 3 2 weeks ago. There's a couple of movies he really likes. One of them is Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, which I can now recite verbatim, front to back. I know every word to that movie. And my 3-year-old, his name is Jude, does not have any understanding of why he can't watch The Lorax at any given moment, of any given day, exactly when he wants to. Now, sometimes I'll tell him no because I'm a sadistic father. But no, seriously, like, hey, Dad, I want to watch The Lorax. Buddy, I don't have something for you to watch it on right now. Like, that doesn't process for him, right? So you've heard this sort of slogan before, the medium is the message. I have a communication degree. One of the things I studied more specifically was I did a few independent studies in college when I was doing my undergrad. One of them was on sort of the historical nature of mass media. So we have sort of these different timelines throughout human history, right? In the tribal era, they sat around by the fire and told stories. And this is kind of how it happened, right? We get into the literate age where an alphabet or some sort of hieroglyphics or whatever in history was starting to become formed. We can now write our ideas down or write these stories down, record them. In the print age, the printing press comes along, and all of a sudden now we've got we can get this message out to thousands, if not millions of people. I think about this in the printing age, in the 1600s in New England. I've read somewhere that, and actually I think I wrote this in one of my papers, that any good New England citizen would be carrying actually a copy of Thomas More's Utopia in his front pocket, or her front pocket, I guess mostly men, but in your jacket pocket. It was very common. Everybody owned a copy of Thomas More's Utopia. And so all of a sudden this explosion of information goes out, right? The telegraph, we get to the electronics age, we get the telegraph, and then the television, which we talked about, these sort of image-based things. But what we have to understand is that the medium of how the information gets out, to a large degree, affects and creates how our way of being and the way we do it. If all I had ever done was hear stories, I'm going to communicate like that. I'm probably going to more likely to give a lot of oratory and tell long, extravagant stories and give really good detail and follow it really well. I don't. I come from a generation that's used to 140 characters or less. As a result, I have to practice being a good storyteller because I'm used to small little nuggets and sound bites. We process information most efficiently when it's presented. When I say we, the generation I, process the information most efficiently when it's presented in these sort of small sound bites and nuggets. We're a generation raised in front of the television and later the internet. And everything in our lives has been fun for us. Teachers have tried everything to find ways to make education more fun, more enjoyable. Part-time jobs are alleviated by having fun. Everything is expected to be amusing. Older generations may have preferred long discourse, long public discourse even. I once read that Abraham Lincoln, I can't remember who he was debating with. He was in a political debate during one of the, sorry? Frederick Douglass, that's right, I'm sorry. See, I don't need Google, I got you. He was in a debate, and I think Douglass went first. And Douglass spoke for like 6 hours or something like that, or 5 hours. I mean, it was just this long, and he steps down, and Lincoln goes up and goes, why don't we take a 2-hour break? I don't know exactly how he worded it, but he basically excused everybody for 2 hours to go eat dinner and take a break, and then to come back, and they all showed up again. That would never happen in Generation I. We'd all be voting for the first guy because we're ready to go somewhere. Lincoln would have never been president, right? I mean, we just... And we're also marked largely by this, and we'll revisit this a few times here in a moment. Personal information overload. Whereas anybody ever watch the show Mad Men? Anybody else a fan of that show? I'm the only one, like 3 of us? Wow. Man, you guys really need to join the new generation. Comes on AMC. If you want it on demand, you can watch it on Netflix. So it takes place in the 1960s. And I'm so struck over and over, they did a really good job of sort of making it a historical fiction. And one of the themes that comes up over and over again is when someone asks the main character a personal question, he completely ignores it and doesn't answer. Because to him, there's this idea that you don't share that kind of person. You don't talk about finances with people. You certainly don't talk about sex. You don't talk about, there's there's these topics that are off limits, right? Yeah, in Generation I, that's not really the case. If you have been on Facebook any time in the last year, you know, and if you have anything more, if you've got more than about 50 or 75 friends, you know that about half of them are really, really happy about what's going on in politics, and the other half are really, really cheesed off, and they're going to let you know about it. It's not just that the barriers have been lowered, but it's that the information is actually considered pertinent to in a lot of ways. There's actually a level of trust that is earned by that sort of disclosure within Generation I. And there's a level of trust that is withheld if it seems that those types of conversations are somehow closed off. Work ethic, let's talk about this. You might think it's on nothing but a bunch of yellow energy. That might be the way it comes across. I will say this, let me say it this way. Generation I likes their time off. We like to show up at 8, maybe even early. If there's a big project going on, my company, we have beast mode. We call it beast mode. It happens about once a quarter, and it's during beast mode, man, we're on it. And we're there, and we get there early, and we leave late, and we're working our tails off. But once beast mode is over, man, I'm going to Vegas. And we'll get back to Vegas in a second. We work hard until the bell rings, and then we're home. Work is done. Time has begun. While a previous generation might have just worked and worked and worked, and beast mode was kind of the way of life, that's not really the way, generally speaking, Generation I is going to process it. Values. Let's talk about this for just a moment. And this kind of goes in with work ethic. Fewer and fewer issues are black and white. You notice that? Does that seem reasonable to say? We invite discussion. We invite dialogue. We want interpersonal discourse when determining a decision. It's much more of a sort of anything goes attitude in terms of lifestyle choices. I thought about rolling my sleeves when I came up here. I have tattoos on my arms. That's totally fine in Generation I. Who you marry, we don't care who you marry. That's not really, we're good, you know what I mean? You marry who you want to marry. Values and work ethic, I could say this. That's my office. Q1 Media was 2 months ago ranked the number 19 best place to work in the state of Texas. This is my office. And this was not impromptu, by the way. This was a command. This came from the top. We're doing this, and we're putting it on our... I pulled these off the company's Facebook page an hour ago because I thought about it and thought this is a good... That's our break room. The guys on my team and I have a very serious Street Fighter competition going every day. At 2:30, there's no work being done in that office because we will be playing Street Fighter from 2:30 to 3. If you're looking for me at 2:30, I will not be at my desk, nor will I be answering the phone. I will be right there, winning. At Q1, here's a good example of what I think, showing sort of some of the broad difference, okay? A while ago, I went back to Andrew's computer. I was using his computer. It's the one he uses he works at BP, and it's his BP computer. And he was listening to some music. He had it playing, and I looked at him and was like, really, Andrew? Like, your music is terrible. Can I please change this, you know? And he goes, yeah, I don't have any music on here. And I'm like, this is Generation I, like Pandora. Come on. So I get on his browser, and I open up his browser, and I type in, I go Pandora.com, and I get this thing. It's like, this website has been determined that it's, you know, like a security thing. Took it out, I was like, are you kidding me? I wish I had a picture of it. At Q1, we all sit in a big office, and like the VPs or whatever, the owners, they have their own offices. We don't. We all sit at tables because we like to collaborate. And in the middle of the office, there's a 40-inch smart TV facing out, and we have speakers all in there. And it's always on a Pandora station. That's what it's for, is to play Pandora for us to all listen to while we're working. By the way, that music is very diverse. We hear everything from country to rap, and none of it is edited. We don't listen to edited versions. Why would we do that? So I'm giving you sort of an extreme example because I do think that Q1 is not standard. I don't think that this is the way every company should be or every company is. I'm not trying to make that argument. What I'm trying to say is this company is full of people in my generation. Our sales director, the director of sales at my company is 26 years old. And she's awesome at her job. Leisure time for us during the workday increases productivity in our minds. The values that we hold about who you marry and whether you cuss at work and whether the music you listen to has cuss words in it, these are the sorts of things that a lot of those barriers have been brought down big time. Okay, mentioned the dialogue thing. Everything is up for discussion. Fewer and fewer things have black and white answers, and because of that, we're interested in having conversations about decisions and hearing other sides of the situation. Generation I has much less of a we're right, you're wrong mentality when it comes to many issues. Now, a good example of this I could use, and again, I'm not trying to make a political statement when I say this, so please don't hear it that way. But if you look at the way Barack Obama ran his campaigns over both of his campaigns. Now, whether or not you agree with his politics is irrelevant. You have to tip your hat to the way he engaged the younger generation. Because, safe to say, he captivated a large portion of Generation I, and he did it by connecting with them on their level. He had no problem talking about what kind of dog he was going to get, or filling out an NCAA bracket on ESPN, or revealing what brand of jeans he wears. During the campaign, he sent out emails. I mean, I remember seeing, even during his first campaign, he's got his BlackBerry out. He's sending an email that then I got on my phone. That's how I believe that he was able to connect well with the younger generation. He gave them the Facebook information, that sort of overload, quote unquote, that they've come to expect, that we've come to expect. And if you listen to his rhetoric, he continues in a lot of ways to sort of follow that discussion communication technique, which some have criticized, and that's, again, I'm not trying to endorse a politician here. I'm just trying to show the technique that he used and how he used it effectively to engage the generation.